Well, the meetings that we get, usually it's someone close to the head of state, like the president or prime minister. Metaplanet definitely has picked up on all of their radars. We cannot not pick up on Metaplanet. We have some engagements in Japan, Taiwan, Suriname, Malaysia, and Indonesia. We had very good discussions for months. The World Bank came a few weeks later and then they stopped replying to us. Tone setting of the executive order is a very important piece of this. When the US does something seriously with accumulating for their Bitcoin reserve, everyone else will follow. It's getting to the point where it's career risk not to get into Bitcoin.
Archie.
Nation state adoption. What's happening in the world of orange pilling sovereigns?
With the strategic reserve, the executive order for that, and new developments is probably the most interesting aspect of nation state adoption right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you do see follow-on with that. Like Pakistan announced that they're setting up their own strategic reserve. They appointed Saylor. I haven't fact-checked that.
I haven't seen anything verified on that.
I've seen it, but I haven't verified it.
Yeah.
So take that with a grain of salt that he's their advisor now. But you know, it's whether the US makes a big move, like a really tangible move, like passing the Bitcoin Act and actively accumulating Bitcoin, I think that is going to be the next big driver for nation state adoption. But we'll see like little bits and pieces happening here and there. And we do have our engagements and we're trying to move things along, but it's difficult. Like if you think of it as a normal person, where does Bitcoin stack up in your attention span in a given day? It's probably like, towards the bottom somewhere. It's the same for countries. Like they're always focused on some higher level drama, like Iran and Israel right now, probably top of mind. But it's difficult to kind of get them to prioritize something. But one silver lining, I think, of the Bitcoin treasury companies is that they're elevating that in the awareness. Like in Japan, we engaged with a number of politicians there. Metaplanet definitely has picked up on all of their radars. We cannot not pick up on Metaplanet.
It's legitimately a big deal in Japan, right?
It is.
I mean, I know we talk about it in our little bubble, and it's easy for us to, I guess, inflate the importance of some of the events that are happening in Bitcoin. But are we talking mainstream finance in Japan or just the general population?
I would say so. Like it's definitely hitting mainstream financial media, right? Because every day they're gapping up. It's like top volume of all stocks. You cannot ignore this.
And we have an interesting phenomenon. They have an interesting phenomenon in Japan where stock investing, household finances are done by the wife, the woman in the house, right? It's not the man who does it, right?
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting phenomenon. I guess how has Metaplanet, or has it tapped into that aspect of society as well from a retail investor point of view?
I'm not sure, but I just know that there's a ton of retail interest. Like at their shareholder meeting, they held it at the Grand Hyatt, and the lineup to take a photo like out the door, it's a full ballroom, like as big as a conference, as big as many Bitcoin conferences. So you have to at least admire what they've managed to achieve and the level of interest that they've managed to generate for a Bitcoin treasury company.
So are there more, have you heard of any other companies in Japan, given, their history with, their financial history with, I guess, inflation and monetary debasement over 30, 40 years? You would imagine that society would have been looking for something like this for some time in terms of Bitcoin. But now that there's been an established investment vehicle and a demonstrated track record of its success, my guess would be that there would be other companies in Japan lining up to replicate that. Have you heard of? There are?
Yeah, there's a couple. I can't remember the names, but I see like so-and-so company bought 5 million or 3 million. They're popping up now. So it's becoming more of a thing. But you would have thought that Japan would be big into real Bitcoin, like self-custodial Bitcoin. But I think it is difficult still. Like we managed to understand it, but the average person just doesn't want to deal with the hassle of hanging on to Bitcoin, right? It's just a burden that they don't want to deal with.
So how do we deal as an industry, how do we deal with this persistent attitude that I agree with? Most people are intimidated by it, and then yet when you talk about the people who build wallets and the technical people, they couch the discussion in terms of intellectual deficiency of retail. Like if you're either too stupid and you don't deserve it, right? Or they will say, if you can do this, then you can do that. In other words, tough. You either do it the way it is or not at all. And I'm like, well, surely it's incumbent on the industry to accommodate or find a better way for retail to self-custody. Like surely that's the responsibility, right? Rather than just saying, I mean, it's kind of like before Apple, there were only these Windows, not only, but they dominated. And everybody thought that was the only way that personal computers could be manufactured. And it was only when they came in and they simplified a lot of things, made them a lot easier, then, wow, isn't this a fantastic thing?
I think there's a few barriers. Like one is tax treatment, right? For a lot of countries, if you're spending Bitcoin, technically it's a capital gains taxable event. And that is a barrier. So for Japan, I think that's the case too. So you're kind of disincentivized to dealing with spending Bitcoin. And actually, I met someone in Japan before, and they were saying they're using Oppo Wallet to maintain a separate Bitcoin stack because Bitcoin is Bitcoin, and he can keep it in cold storage, but he'll get liquid Bitcoin, which is not Bitcoin, and he can just expend it and manage that and file his taxes accordingly for each transaction, but not have to interfere with his main stack. So that's an interesting workaround. But what you said earlier is right. Like we need to make more accessible tools and make them so beneficial that you want to have your own Bitcoin in your own wallet so that you can do all these things like, pay bills and convert and, use it in many beneficial ways in your life. So I think that is one step. But the other aspect of it, I think, is simply just time and learning. It just takes time that people need. They need to understand that they should hold their own assets. And it's a big gap going from your money's in your bank and it's safe, quote unquote, to I need to keep my own money and take responsibility for that completely on my own, 100%. And if it is lost or stolen, it's gone for good. And that chasm is a big chasm. And I don't know if there's a shortcut to get there. And I don't even know if we can fully bridge that just by making better Bitcoin wallets. And this might be a natural phenomenon that takes time. Like one thing I think helped for Canada was when the government declared martial law and started freezing bank accounts. And I think that educated a lot of Canadians into realizing I probably need some insurance in the form of Bitcoin, which cannot be frozen. Because that was unprecedented, but it showed how fragile the traditional system is. Like the government can just say, okay, you're a terrorist now because you donated to this convoy protesting lockdowns and mandated vaccine injections. And that is pretty shocking to most people that in a Western country, liberal democracy, that you can have this type of totalitarian, authoritarian acts happening. And it can happen anywhere. But outside of that, if that didn't happen, I would say a lot of people wouldn't understand that or cross that chasm. But because it happened, they did. So it's almost like you have to have that pain before you will move out of your comfort zone.
Let's do a quick tour around the world. We've got United States, of course. That's I think the changes we've had or the progress we've experienced there in the first 6 months, at least from a legislative point of view and political support, has been fantastic. We're yet to see Trump follow through on that, but we're hearing a lot of noises from like David Sachs and Bo Hines saying this is going to be, bigger than people imagine, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. Then a whole bunch of states who are actually pushing through legislation to establish strategic Bitcoin reserves for themselves. We've got a bunch of companies doing the same, adopting it as a corporate treasury, not becoming Bitcoin treasury companies as such, but using Bitcoin as part of their asset mix on their balance sheet, which is fantastic. That's what we want to see as well. Operating companies allocating to Bitcoin in addition to whatever else that they use. It's just part of their treasury management. That's fantastic. ETFs, phenomenal success. I don't think many people expected that level of success. All right, the most successful ETFs in history, ETF launches. And that's just going to get stronger and stronger, it seems like. We could see a multi-year boom in ETF flows for Bitcoin. Municipalities are starting to, some pension funds are starting to allocate to Bitcoin. So that's
State level too in the US.
Yeah, state level, yep. And so that's fantastic. And then we move over to Europe, okay? Very slow. It's like nothing's really happened yet at the state level. We're seeing just some noises. It kind of feels like we're in 2022 in Europe compared to the United States. It's like 3 years ago. And things are not really progressing much. And so to Asia, I know Hong Kong, Singapore. I'm not sure if I've seen anything from Malaysia, Indonesia. Fill in the gaps where I'm missing out.
Well, we have some engagements in Malaysia and Indonesia. Hopefully, we'll get something going.
Yeah?
Maybe within this year. We'll see.
Okay, because I love what Bhutan's done, right? And I know some people are a bit dirty on them for selling, but I'm like, listen, it's a small country. It's not a wealthy country, right? It's a small country. They're mining Bitcoin to build infrastructure, to build schools, to build highways, airports and things like this. Like, don't you go to work and earn a living and then spend that money? Yeah. So what's wrong with them doing it?
Well, they absolutely need those things because it opens the door to more investments.
Yeah.
Like when I meet with a lot of governments in less developed countries, one of the things I say is you can mine Bitcoin and build a hospital and road and railways or whatever, but that is a central part of it. Like you can mine the Bitcoin to get other things to develop the country. And I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But Bhutan is a great example.
It is a great example, isn't it? Especially like most of their energy for Bitcoin mining is like
green
hydro electricity, right? Like that would otherwise just be a river flowing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like and then making money from that. And I just think that's fantastic, right? What else have we got?
There is a little bit of movement in Taiwan.
Yeah.
So we met with one of the legislators there, JC, and we're going to see if we can move it forward more. But yeah, that's there. Japan, hopefully something will happen soon.
I just would have thought Japan would be all in already. Like Japan as a society, not necessarily the government, because I know the government always wants to maintain the monopoly of printing its own currency and all the rest of that. But as a society, that they would recognize it more readily.
It's really hard to move. Like, it's slow moving. You need to have agreement, and everyone is risk averse. That's the biggest thing that we've learned from engaging with governments. They're all very risk averse. So if you look at it,
from the financial risk or publicity risk, everything, just whatever.
So if you look at a company, like let's say GameStop again, right? It's career risk. Like if Ryan Cohen goes all in and it doesn't work and it crashes, then he'll end his career. And it's the same, but political career risk for politicians, right? If they advocate for Bitcoin and Bitcoin goes down, then they look bad. Even though we know Bitcoin will go back up, they're still concerned about these things. But it's got to get to the point where it's career risk not to get into Bitcoin. And I think a lot of them also are waiting for someone else to make a move, specifically the US. That's why I'm very bullish or grateful for movements in the US, because that makes our job a lot easier, because we'll just say, like, look at the US, right? Like Korea will look at the US, Japan will look at the US, Taiwan will look at the US. And you saw that with the ETFs. And I think when the US does something seriously with accumulating for their Bitcoin reserve, everyone else will follow. So we're just kind of priming all the different actors in Asia to wait for that. And when it happens, we'll go back and say it's time to execute on what we talked about.
So I spoke to Jeff Park from Bitwise, who I'm sure you're familiar with, and I said, well, what do you make out of the strategic Bitcoin reserve? And he said, nothing. If it's an executive order, it can be reversed when the next president comes in. And I said, well, okay, what kind of weight do you give it? He's like, I give it 0 because an executive order can just be reversed. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's true. But I think with great political cost, I wonder if I'm curious about how the Democrats will react to the effectiveness of the Crypto Political Action Committee that, they mobilized in the space of 12, 18 months, and they were very, very effective, very powerful and very effective. I think they're starting to realize what happened to them as a result of their position on crypto in general, shall we say, right? Because it wasn't just Bitcoin companies doing that, it was the crypto industry, so to speak, right? So I wonder, what is their reaction going to be now? Are they going to restock and say, hey, I think we got that wrong. I think we need to be more conciliatory and facilitating of this industry's ambitions, and I think that's going to be a good thing for the country? Or do they become even more belligerent and vindictive and say, we're going to unwind everything this motherfucker does for this industry as payback for what they did to us in getting Trump re-elected? I can't read anything one way or the other yet, but it's
too early.
It is too early, but I'm kind of encouraged by some more of the bipartisan voices, some more Democrats voicing support for the industry, but I don't see their leadership doing that, and I don't see a chorus of support coming from them. How do you see that?
Well, I see the concern that you have. I've said the same thing. Like, it's a pendulum. If it swings too far one way, it'll swing harder the other way. So we'll see. But I think there are things that we can do because the next election is not for a while. Like, bipartisan groups should engage with Democrats and educate them more about Bitcoin. But yeah, I can't read it either way. We'll see. But I think Jeff is wrong that it's a nothing burger. It just depends on if, I don't know, Bo Hines or David Sachs can actually execute on the budget neutral acquisition. And I'm still hopeful that they can get that across because it's within the scope of the executive order. At the same time, I hope that the Bitcoin Act passes and they can actually formally do something. But I think the tone setting of the executive order is a very important piece of this because we can take that and go to other countries and say, hey, look at that. And while it's not active accumulation, it is at least something that we can present. And everyone looks to the US for guidance. If you look at the ETFs, it's the same thing. US started and then, Canada kind of had them, but it wasn't until the US made the move that Hong Kong ETFs and Australian ETFs came. And now we're seeing other regions look to open up to ETFs, if not launch their own. Like Korea, that's one thing they're looking at too.
So that's one thing Europe also beat the United States. So they had Bitcoin ETPs before the ETF announcement, but it just seems at the sovereign level, there's just this impasse. There's no motivation, there's no impetus to get involved, or even just facilitating the industry. Even if at the sovereign level, central banks don't want to do anything, they don't acknowledge the fact that the industry needs legislation that allows them to just do what they need to do to be competitive on a global scale. Like United Kingdom, London in particular, where I live, it's got a long pedigree and history of being the global financial capital and trade capital at various points, right? Most recently, from the last financial boom, it was essentially the finance capital of the world. That's gone now. It's no longer that. Yeah. But there is this long history of it being a finance center, and it can draw upon the expertise, the infrastructure, the existing capital markets, all of that stuff to be a leader in this industry. And it's just doing nothing. And it doesn't make any sense to me why that's the case. Like they're not even, and this is a nation that after Brexit, it's lost its mojo, right? There is no direction. The once giant industry that, it sort of waved the British flag internationally is no more, right? Like It's not even up for issue anymore, up for discussion anymore. London's not the finance capital of the world anymore. And they're not even looking at this as an opportunity. It's just, there's a sort of malaise about the country and the city. And they're just like in denial about what's happened. And they have no idea what to do about it.
Yeah, a lot of financial centers just kind of self-obliterated, right? Like Hong Kong is another good example. It's massively declined from the glory days when it was also a financial center. But, if they wake up and they embrace Bitcoin, there's a chance to recover. The question is, how do they wake up?
Yeah. So when in your discussions with various sovereigns, which part of government seems to invite the discussion and which parts tend to demonstrate the most resistance to the idea of Bitcoin? So who is inviting you to have chats? Which, I don't mean literally individuals, but which parts of government typically do that?
Well, the meetings that we get, usually it's someone close to the head of state, like the president or prime minister. And we do get some engagement from different departments. Like in Japan, we met with the Ministry of Finance through one of our contacts there. And we met with the Bank of Japan too. What else did we meet? Yeah, a lot of politicians as well. It just varies. There's no specific group in the government that's advocating. And we've even met with like some central banks too, like calls and meeting in person. So it's really across the board.
So what do they want to know?
Well, one central bank we met with, they were just curious about Bitcoin, but they were also very negative towards it too, which is kind of weird because they wanted to talk to us. And then they're kind of negative about it the whole call. So I think they're just trying to research and fact find.
Yeah. Do you find that any of them are looking to be convinced of something? Like, do they come to you with problems about Bitcoin? Do they surface the objections first?
I think so. Bank of Japan, we were advocating for them to do something with Bitcoin, but their attitude is more conservative and saying like, we can't do anything. Like off the bat, nothing can be done. So the other one we had a call with, I don't want to disclose it, but they were keen to set up a meeting with us and talk about Bitcoin. And we spent like 45 minutes talking about the entire landscape. And they're just kind of like, yeah, that's cool, but we don't need it. So it's a mixed bag, but things change too. Like we met with the Central Bank of Suriname when we were in Suriname and we met the president there. And we had very good discussions for months. And we were proposing that they put 1% of their reserves into Bitcoin. And that was why we actually made the trip down there, because the discussions progressed quite well. But then after we went there, the World Bank came a few weeks later and then they stopped replying to us. So there's a lot of different factors at play, and if they're responsive or if they will even do anything.
So it makes sense to me in some regards why nation states might be resistant, right? Especially, let's say, the government, right? Prime ministers, reserve banks and whatever. They've got a particular interest to defend. But why wouldn't more commercial entities, especially in a place like Japan, why aren't they more enthusiastic about it? I'm not talking about the metaplanets and the similar sort of trail of companies that will follow in their wake, but like the Sony Corporation, for example, or any of the larger Japanese commercial industrial entities. Like, are they expressing any interest in this? Have you had any sort of inbound feelers from commercial entities?
No, we haven't targeted them, but generally, like those large corporations are very risk averse.
But
and
more risk averse than a nation state?
yes,
Really?
you wouldn't think so, but
Yeah.
almost at the same level. But the funny thing is that they're interested in like blockchain technology, like
To do what? But they love talking about it, don't they?
yeah, like I think it's just like a new technology, even though it's not new technology. Like Sony they bought an exchange, and I think they're trying to do some Web3 blockchain projects.
So they read a LinkedIn post in 2011 and they finally had the courage to raise it at a committee meeting at Sony. And so he's finally had it registered as an agenda item and he's going to get his chance to shine, right? Let's talk about blockchain, not Bitcoin.
Yeah, we're back in like 2015 or something like that.
It feels that way. I remember I might have even echoed that sentiment back in like 2013. And I'm looking back, I don't even know what I meant by it. I may have only said it once or twice in my life. And I'm like, I didn't know much about Bitcoin, let alone blockchain. Why did I say that? Did I read it in The Economist or something? I thought it was something smart to say.
I don't know. Bitcoin is just like Bitcoin is an alien concept still. Like, even though we had a lot of meetings and we would say, this is earlier when the ATS first launched.
Are you talking in a corporate setting, it's alien to them, or?
Well, both. Anything.
yeah.
Any setting. It's still alien technology. But when the ETFs launched, we would go and have meetings and we would say, guess what? The largest asset manager on the planet has launched a Bitcoin ETF and it's wildly successful. And they're like, okay, cool.
Not moved by that at all?
That's an alien concept.
And are you getting that reaction across the world, or is specifically like
It's getting better now.
Japanese, Asian context?
Across the world, but it's getting better. It's getting better.
So why is it getting better then?
I think
If Larry Fink can't move you, right?
a lot of people
The White
don't-
House can't move you. What's happening that's moving the needle?
Well, I think the White House is moving.
He's moving. Okay.
It is moving. That's what it's making it more powerful now, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think the new president of Korea has spoken favorably, and we have contacts there.
Well, that was
that are
bipartisan, wasn't it? Because both the opposition and the incumbent said that they would enact pro-Bitcoin legislation.
Yeah. I think it's just time. It takes time for things to percolate. So, the first 6 months after ETF launch, even though it's successful, it's not enough. But now we have, a year plus of data, and you have the US moving on it and Trump talking about it. It's slowly getting into their systems and it's like simmering.